Welcome, everyone, to this month's episode of Outspoken. I am Dr. Regina Davis Moss, and as always, Outspoken is our space to speak our truth and stand together through the challenges, the urgency, and everything in between. Today's episode is Freedom Work, Resistance and Reproductive Justice, Lessons from Chicago, DC, and Memphis. This is where we name what's happening, call out the systems that are doing harm, and lift up the organizers on the front lines. And as we close out this year, we are in a moment of deep urgency, especially as ICE and Border Patrol escalate their violence across the country. DC, Memphis, Chicago, Charlotte, on and on. And these are not abstract issues. These are not just headlines for us. These are our families, our communities, and they're being targeted right now. But let me be clear. This is not a moment for us to shrink back or to look away. This is a moment for us to get clear, to get steady, to get in community. And even in moments when it's hard like this, we can still see the power of sustained community, the formation, the long haul organizing that keeps us safe and connected long before a crisis hits. So together and today, we're going to be talking about those things because in reproductive justice, we have to hold both of those truths. We don't get to choose one or the other. We have to honor the full landscapes of our experiences, the grief and the possibility, the danger and the power. So we're going to start by talking about the harm that our communities are facing, but then we're going to shift to what it means to build strong, grounded organizing that lasts. So let's get into it. I want to talk about the things that our people are feeling on the ground right now, especially in the DMV area and Memphis. And to help us understand the realities people are facing, I want to bring in two powerful voices. Both of them joined me in DC in September for our summit, Amber Sherman and Sam Master. Hey.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Hey, thanks for having us.
I am so glad you all are here. This is such an important conversation. Amber, why don't we start with you? First, let folks know a little bit more about who you are. And then after that, Sam, I'm going to ask you to also tell our audience the same thing.
Yeah, of course. My name is Amber Sherman, or A is for Afro on Instagram and TikTok. I'm a policy organizer in Memphis, born and raised, and I organize with our official Bill in Memphis chapter in Memphis and Decarcerate Memphis, working on policies that decarcerate the city, but also provide our folks with resources and keep them safe.
And Sam.
Hey, thank you again for having us. My name is Sam Master, and I'm an organizer and educator from Baltimore, Maryland. I grew up right outside of DC in PG County, and I live in Baltimore now. Um, Thank you for having us again.
All right, so let's get into it. Let's talk about what's happening on the ground. Amber, let me start with you. Tell me what's happening in Memphis right now as ICE and Border Patrol activity has increased.
Yeah, I mean, it's chaos. So not only do we have ICE and Border Patrol there, but we also have the FBI, the DEA, ATF, HSI, Homeland Security. We also have the Department of State, IRS, all of these folks who are federal agents that are acting within their capacity as federal agents by doing traffic stops with our state troopers, the Sheriff's Department, and the Memphis Police Department. There's about close to 2,000 federal agents right now, and they're doing these traffic stops every day, all day long. They're pulling folks over and arresting them if they can. If not, they're giving them tickets. We have a dashboard that actually was just published 2 weeks ago that we pressured our mayor to create. And just last week, we were at 20,000 traffic stops and about 17,000 traffic citations. And the majority of folks who've been arrested and put in jail are there for financial responsibility. So, like not having insurance, not having their registration up to date, or not having their registration up to date within a certain time period because you get like a 60-day grace period, or not having a suspended license, not having a valid license, and like not being on a payment plan for that license because we do have a drive while you pay program, and then also other things like brake lights being out, using these pretextual traffic stops to pull people over, and then using that to then find another reason to arrest and charge them. They have these arrest quotas, so they're trying to arrest at least 100 people a day. And so they're using any type of reason they can to arrest folks, even if it's just for financial responsibility, like insurance or your registration. And then they have a lot of folks who are being arrested for misdemeanors, like having a warrant for missing court, or basic like assault, like if you have an assault charge or you assaulted an officer, or accused of assaulting an officer. They've been putting that on a lot of folks who they aren't able to find a record on. And so we have been responding heavily to those folks who are being pulled over, to those folks who are being arrested, and also those who are being detained by ICE, because there was a new ICE detention center in Mason, Tennessee, which is about an hour away, that was opened up recently. And so there's multiple places people can be taken. So we have to have groups of people who are finding those folks, because when they're pulled over by police, we don't necessarily know where they are at the time, or if they aren't able to reach out to someone. We just find out a day later when they don't come home. And so it's a very traumatic experience that folks are going through right now. People aren't leaving their houses. Our small businesses especially are suffering greatly because no one is going to eat out. They're not going to stores to shop. People are being sent home early from restaurants because they don't have people coming in, and it's putting a huge barrier, on our economy and killing it. Basically, our tourism is also down 40+%, and those are the main things that keeps Memphis economically sound.
And I mean, talk a little bit about what you're hearing from people that have experienced these arrests. Like, how long are they being detained? What's happening? Are they being, when they're trying to enforce their rights, what's that experience like for them?
Oh, it's horrible. Our jail is extremely overcrowded. Last week we were at 3 deaths in the jail in a 10-day period. Yesterday, a Black woman died in the jail, in the women's jail. Folks are not eating the food because it's horrible food, so they're malnourished and they're passing out. They're putting hundreds of people in a room that's meant to fit 60 people. Our jail has a capacity of like 2,000. There's about 3,500 people in there right now, and it's taking a very long time for them to get out. So even when your bail is paid, it takes about 2 weeks for them to actually get out of jail. Right now, it's closer towards that 1 week, 2 week period. It was a couple days, but we've paid folks bail, and then they were still in jail for another week after that because we don't have a night court. So all the judges are only there from 9 to 5. And then after that, if you haven't had an arraignment hearing, you're still in jail. And even if your bail is paid, but you haven't had your arraignment hearing or don't have a court date that's been assigned to you, they will not let them out. And the processing period is extremely long because our court system is still using paper. So they're still writing things by hand on paper and transporting that for people. They're losing paperwork. They're not able to find something. They have to redo it. That starts the process all the way over. And so the normal processing time that was maybe 18 hours has now become at least 10 to 15 days, which is an extreme violation of their 4th and 8th Amendment rights that we have been calling out as an organization, because we actually got a standing bail order put in place several years ago because Shelby County was violating people's rights when it came to bail and not allowing them to be let out in a realistic time. And they were offering people plea deals when they were still in the holding room. So they were offering someone a plea deal and getting them on a plan where they can't, re-offend for a year, but they have to plead guilty. But because they're so desperate to get out of jail, they're saying yes, even though that's obviously against the law. And so that standing bail order was really able to impact that. And now all of that kind of work has been pushed to the side by this task force.
Wow. Sam, what are you seeing in the DMV area?
Much of what Amber said about what's happening in Memphis, as we know, DC was one of the early cities to be occupied by federal forces. And people don't often think about DC as a colony, but it truly is. It is a place very much like Puerto Rico or US Samoa that is a federal colony that does not have statehood. And so that legal loophole, that the inability of DC residents to have statehood has really amplified the type of terrible federal enforcement that we are seeing on the ground. Now, I'm based in Baltimore, but am deeply connected with organizers from Free DC and Harriet's Wildest Dreams who have been really moving on the ground to institute mutual aid and to do direct and rapid response. And so what we are seeing, very much like what Amber said, is federal agencies setting up checkpoints to really entrap undocumented people throughout the city and anyone who is riding with undocumented people. Things like the militarization of our subway systems. DC a few weeks ago put in place a youth curfew that was meant to criminalize young people and has led to the hyper arrest and the upshooting of arrest of young people in the city, primarily Black and brown people. Similarly, our jails are overcrowded in DC. And so whereas I think the average jail is meant to hold about 200 people per cell, there's upwards of like hundreds more of people being packed like sardines into these concentration camp like conditions. And so what we are seeing is every federal agency that you can imagine on the ground harassing, detaining, intimidating people. We have seen, of course, an uptick in just the completely like the best example that I can use for what ICE and Border Patrol are doing is acting as slave catchers. And I think, and that is like the direct historical corollary here. And then the stories that the administration is churning out that are completely false about high crime in the city has led to an over policing of our young people, of our community members, hyper incarceration of them, and the murder of them. DC police has killed 3 people in the last 4 days. Either DC police or federal agents have killed 3 people in the last 4 days, including shooting at moving vehicles. And so what it tells us is that these people have been told that they are above the law and are instituting an all-out offensive on children, on elders, on community members, whether they are documented, undocumented. And so we are living in a state of just hyper criminalization, surveillance, and I think fear.
Yeah, and I mean, you're spot on in that they do believe that they are above the law. But I also think that's compounded with the fact that there is a deep sort of brutality and cruelty to this. It's almost as if they are taking out something deeply embedded in them and these people. And those are the stories that we're not seeing. Those are not in the headlines.
And
Yes,
if
please.
I could just respond to that, Regina, I think that, for me over the last few months, history has been the most effective tool of analysis in understanding where we are. The Proud Boys, the white militarized forces that were present on January 6th have been inducted into our national law enforcement and are taking Klan-like grievances out on innocent civilians. There is a direct correlation. It is a direct parallel to the way that slave catchers acted and the way that Klan members who were then deputized through sheriff's departments, police departments, the courts, were able to enact and play out like white violence, white grievance, ethno-nationalism and hatred out on community members. And so we are living through this current iteration of that. And so I think that we have to be very honest about, we are dealing with white citizens councils, and these are people who are of all ethnicities. I am always floored and disgusted when I see Black ICE agents articulating these same types of violence. But these people have lost their humanity. They don't see humanity in the people that they have been tasked with targeting, and it's playing out in real time before our eyes.
Mhm.
And just to plus what Sam said, that's exactly what's happening in Memphis. We passed ordinances that did not allow the police to do pretextual traffic stops, do traffic stops in unmarked cars or plain clothes. And these federal agents are coming here so they can do those things that our police department is not allowed to do, because they made a huge deal about not being able to do it. All these white folks came out to city council meetings complaining about it. They went to the state, they asked for the state to pass a bill, and they're using every possible avenue, like these federal agents, to do what they want to do because they want to do their bidding. They want to overpolice our communities, surveil us, and they were not allowed to do that locally. And so they're just trying to find whatever avenue they can to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then there's also an incentive. They're being incentivized to do this too. Can you share a little bit more about that?
I mean, I'm happy to share. I think that
Yes.
Amber, we are both existing in the same kind of parallel universe of right now when Trump's terrible, horrible, no good, very bad bill passed over the summer, it increased ICE's budget, ICE and Border Patrol's budget by over 400%. And so they are our best funded federal department in this current iteration, while the Department of Education has been all but shuttered, while people are not able to access enough food, while hell, HBCUs are they're historically underfunded. Where we have funding right now is ICE and Border Patrol. And what that has led to is a lot of sweetheart deals for people who want to enter into this particular market of human abduction and human trafficking. So people are able to access things like student loan forgiveness,
Right.
signing bonuses, housing, and like discounts on housing. And so there are all of these ways, similar to how the military preys on young, poor Black and Brown people, that ICE and Border Patrol are being able to incentivize inviting people into this behemoth human trafficking apparatus. And I've started to think about ICE and Border Patrol, as well as these federal agencies, as entry points into human trafficking. They are putting our community members in jails and prisons, but also in concentration camps where they are forced to work for $1.65 a day, doing all of these tasks necessary to make the concentration camp run until they are either killed or deported, sometimes not even to the countries of their origin. And so we just, I am, I am so angry at that we have allowed as a nation the prison system, which we know is legalized slavery, to inform the immigration system, which is legalized concentration camps, in order to create this idea of safety that cannot exist as long as these institutions, police, ICE, BPD, exist.
Yeah, we were seeing that same people the same way people being incentivized there. It's happening here. The Mason Detention Center that opened up, the community was extremely against building that detention center. They packed out that meeting, like there were hundreds of people there. The mayor of Mason, Tennessee is a Hispanic man, and he said that he wanted to approve the plan because they needed good paying jobs there. And when they brought this task force to Memphis, our governor said that they were also bringing $100 million in grant funding, which was already in the budget previously, earlier in the year. That was already money we were going to be getting. But now, if you read the RFP, it says that we have to sign, our county has to sign a 287G contract. And they just signed that contract last week because they're weak.
And I would say in Baltimore, what's happening now is once the president said that he was going to send in troops, our governor decided that in order to kind of appease him, he was going to send in more state troopers into Baltimore City and surrounding areas. And while Baltimore City does not have a 287G contract with ICE, the Maryland State Police do, right? And so it was a way of kind of creating this police ICE BPD partnership while circumventing the legal limitations placed on Baltimore City's police force. And so we are also seeing these loopholes be exploited.
Yeah. And I wanted to underscore that because I think people think, this is like hyperbole or just we are being conspiracy theorists when we're saying these things, but people are literally being paid essentially to brutalize, dehumanize, enslave people, and basically, without any risk of, impunity. I want to talk a little bit about, you already alluded to, what you're doing to, help people navigate this moment. But how are, people staying supported or staying informed? You were talking briefly a little bit about these whisper campaigns. Like, what are other things you all are utilizing to help people stay informed?
Yeah, we have a few things happening. So we already have movement orgs in Memphis that have been organizing for quite a while. And so we have those support systems that already exist. Our official Bill in Memphis chapter, just yesterday with Memphis Arts for Change, did a mutual aid feeding event. We went out and handed out food to folks in the city of Memphis in front of City Hall and gave them a love letter to, community members here, like saying that we support you, and also calling out that the current conditions we're living in and the reasons why we have to hand out food is because of the failures of our government and because of the failures of these elected officials who are not taking care of folks. We also have a rapid response hotline with Vicendarios 901 that's actually been operating since 2017. And
Yeah.
they're the hotline that folks can call. You can call 901-329-7979 or text it, and you can send pictures if you see task force activity. You can also call if someone's been taken by ICE and you're trying to track where they are. We have a separate search team just of people who are searching for folks and finding them and helping to connect them with resources, with lawyers and other things. We also have a group of folks who are reconnecting folks with their families because people are being taken in the middle of the day and they have children. Like last week, we had a 3-year-old that had been separated from her family and hasn't been with them for several weeks because we can't figure out how to get her back to Honduras because there's all these federal laws about human trafficking, which we're not doing, but the government is. And so we can't just send someone's child back to a different country because we don't have the legal barriers to do that. So they're trying to figure that out still now. We also have a rideshare program that I created where different folks like volunteers from Indivisible Memphis and our Free the 901 campaign are volunteering to drop people off at work or school or pick folks' kids up from school or pick folks up from work or take them to doctor's appointments because they can't drive because they're being stereotyped and racially profiled everywhere they go. And so we have a white person driving them, at least they won't be stopped. And so we've been running that rideshare program for about 2 weeks now. And the Free the 901 campaign is a campaign of different organizations that are coming together to provide resources to the community to keep Memphis safe. I also post rapid response alerts every single day based off the hotline folks are calling. So we use the saturated locations from that hotline to warn people about those areas for the next day. And then also send pictures. And we have a map that shows the areas that are the most heavily saturated so people know what areas to avoid. So they hopefully won't come into contact with police. And we do that daily. And then we also provide updates in real time. So people can send messages to our Instagram or Facebook page, and we post those in the stories in real time so people can get updates if they're needing to go somewhere and they're unsure about the area they're in.
Sam, what strategies or tools are communities in DC relying on?
Yeah, so I can talk about DC and then the kind of broader DMV. So in DC, I want to really big shout out to Free DC, Harriet's Wildest Dreams, Black Swan Academy, and others who have been really doing this for much longer than the occupation has been in effect. And I think one of the reasons that DC, to me, is one of the models for how to respond in this era is because many of the organizing projects, things like East of the River Mutual Aid and mutual aid networks. Harriet's Wildest Dreams was doing court watching and court support way before this. They were able to adapt those tools and skills when the occupation rose in order to be more effective at bringing people together, mobilizing and organizing folks. So they've been doing things like jury nullification trials, which is why the guy who threw the Subway sandwich has not been indicted. They have been doing community trainings with folks. And so they're doing a DMV Federal Worker Solidarity Fund for government workers because paychecks are still weeks away.
Yeah.
And so those are the things that we have been doing. One of the other things that has been happening is like these cross-city, occupation collaboration opportunities for us to talk to each other about what we're seeing and what strategies can be adapted from LA to DC to Memphis to New Orleans to Baltimore, as to Portland, like as the threat of occupation rises up, we get more and more knowledge at our back about how do we build processes for our people to respond. And so those are some things that we've been doing. In addition to shout out to CASA of Maryland and DC Migrant Mutual Aid, who has been really staffing phone lines and hotlines so that when people do get picked up, we can put in rapid response requests for people to kind of identify where their folks are. We have been doing mutual aid, so things like taking groceries to people, escorting young people home from the subway. That's how one of our homies, Afeni, got arrested, was doing cop watch. And so we have really been trying to show up and show out for our broader community. And what's also been really beautiful, and I think what Free DC did that was really smart, was they created a network for DC and Maryland folks to throw down as federal agents set up checkpoints in Maryland and Virginia, in order to kind of build our collective regional capacity to respond to these threats.
So I love that you said as we do this, we are finding out more and more how we can support with lessons learned essentially. For people who are watching who want to support either locally or from anywhere, what do you need most from them in this moment?
Bail funds. We need bail funds. We have folks getting astronomical bail amounts. We bailed someone out last week for traffic citations. Her bail was $25,000.
My God.
What? Oh my
Orderly
gosh.
conduct bills are 50,000 plus. So folks can go to bit.ly/Memphis Bail Fund, capital M, capital B, capital F, to donate or to share with people. There's also an immigrant pantry that Indivisible Memphis has started. So if folks are on Instagram, y'all can look up Indivisible Memphis, and they have an immigrant pantry where they're delivering groceries to folks. And they also have an Amazon wish list of groceries that they can deliver to folks, like just directly from Amazon. I don't suggest using Amazon though. I suggest just contacting them directly to support the immigrant pantry. But that's been the main way we've been feeding folks, because they literally would not leave their homes. And these are folks with children, but they're just so afraid to be, separated from their children, they won't leave home. People can also follow us for the Free the 901 campaign at free_the 901 on Instagram. And we post like different support updates on there as well. Just in case like something pops up randomly, you might need. I know last week we had someone who had a very high bill too. We posted like a last minute like call out for that too. And then we also always need people sharing what's happening. I think the biggest issue about Memphis and this Memphis Safe Task Force is that people aren't talking about it as much as other places, but we have the most federal agents of any city there right now that has a deployment. There's ICE agents, but also there's all these federal agents that are doing these racially profiling traffic stops. And that's what's making the biggest impact on the city. That's what's causing the biggest amount of harm. People getting tickets from like a state trooper is actually way different from a city ticket that's $21. State trooper tickets are 150 plus. So it's also causing great economic harm on people, because you can get pulled over multiple times in a week. We've had folks get pulled over 3 times in a day. And we have no way of preventing that for them other than just not leaving their houses.
And this is just the racial profiling. This is why they're getting pulled over, and they're not breaking the law.
Profiling. They're not breaking the law. Someone got pulled over. A black lady was doing Lyft. She said they pulled her over and said she didn't have her seatbelt on, and she had her seatbelt on. And then he said, "Oh, never mind," and then left her.
And I just want to pick up what Amber said, that right now, I think there are 3 real ways that people, everyday people like you and I, can get involved. One, if you have a dime, a dollar, or 100, please put it on the books of these organizations. They're really good community organizations. In the DMV, I want to lift up Harriet's Wildest Dreams, freedc.org, and Organizing Black. We're based in Baltimore, but we are getting ready. We have a campaign that we are ready to launch when, not if, but when troops are deployed here. And so you can seed money into organizations doing good work. 2 is join an organization. Friends, we need you. I think Erica Chenoweth says 3.5% of people need to be in the streets to stop this fascist takeover that we are living under. And so if you do not have a political home or an organization you belong to, identify one that aligns with your vision of the world and what you believe, or an issue you care about, and join that joint. And then we do need you to lift up what is happening. There are all of these journalists who no longer work for mainstream publications, who may have Substacks. There may be community journalists who you trust. I know in DC, 51st The News is a fantastic resource. In Baltimore, we have Lisa Snowden at the Baltimore Beat. There's The Tribe in Chicago. If there's a local paper or community, community news source, please lift them up, because we need to be documenting what's happening, and we need your help to do it.
Yeah, on the local news tip, I do want to uplift that, like, as a content creator who is like working to uplift what's happening in Memphis, folks can always follow me on Instagram. I post content multiple times a week with updates. I'm posting an update video today about the National Guard lawsuit, but also MLK 50 is a great place that puts out real journalism that centers people. And the Commercial Appeal does really good investigative work. and the Institute for Public Service Reporting, which actually just put out a really good piece about how federal agents were threatening motel workers and going behind their desk and stealing the registries of folks who were in these motels because they know a lot of immigrants are staying there, and how they threaten them and how they're using that and what their actual legal basis is, which is none. They don't have one. And so people can arm themselves and protect themselves against that kind of abuse, because that's really what's happening. People don't know how to defend themselves against these federal agents. And so they're just giving in to whatever they say because they don't know to push back.
And I would say on top of that, Amber, there are all of these opportunities that we now know for everyday people to be upstanders and not bystanders. And so when you see these agents acting an absolute fool, do not hesitate to pull out your camera. And so please get some training on ICE Watch, on Cop Watch, and on migrant solidarity. We need to let folks know that they are human, they are welcome, and what is happening is not okay.
Period.
Love to see you both, invoking Ida B. Wells, what can you do to help the cause tell the world the facts? And we can all do that. Thank you so much for grounding us in the urgency of this moment. You've already talked about where others can follow your work and stay connected. Sam, do you want to also lift up where people can follow you on your socials?
Yes, the Fire Next Time, TheFirenexTime on all the socials.
All right, thank you. Now we're going to transition to part 2 of Outspoken. What we just heard reminds us that rapid response doesn't happen in a vacuum. It depends on long-term work, and it depends on ongoing work. So now we're going to shift to a discussion about sustained organizing, and that is making this moment survivable for us. So for this next conversation, let's welcome Aisha Hauser and Cheryl Miller. We are going to be talking about relationships, the formation, the trust that is needed long before the crisis hits. Aisha, can you introduce yourself to our audience, as well as tell us how you are feeling in this moment?
Thank you. I'm Aisha Hauser. I am part of the lead ministry team of the Church of the Larger Fellowship. We are a Unitarian Universalist faith movement, and we have a significant prison ministry of over 2,000 people, and we have a global ministry of about 1,500 more. I have been in UU faith leadership for about 20 years. I am committed to trying to fix this deeply broken world. And how am I doing? I just was listening to this conversation and part of me wants to weep. I live in Seattle, Washington, and we'll talk a little bit about what's going on here, which looks very different than what is going on in Memphis and DC and Baltimore. I work in organizing faith leadership and these sustained relationships. So I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm super humbled.
So glad you're here. Cheryl, let everyone know about the important work you're doing in Chicago.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Miller. I'm the health justice organizer for Southside Together and co-lead for the Collaborative for Community Wellness, which is the umbrella coalition for the Treatment Not Trauma campaign, which is the campaign to rebuild public mental health infrastructure and to create a non-police mobile crisis response for behavioral health calls across the city. And
yes, go ahead, please.
Oh no, that was it.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to get into what you all are doing in Chicago and Seattle. Just to reiterate, what we just heard was that rapid response is only as strong as the community that's behind it. So ground us in the current condition, and I'll start with you, Aisha, the current condition in Seattle. What is the community navigating right now, and what should people understand about that specific context? What you said was different.
Yeah, so it's important to know that while we do have ICE on the ground, there have been reports. There's also been, we are, I think, the ground zero of the Proud Boys. And so there are also people dressed who are spotted wearing camouflage and pretending to be ICE. So I will say there are folks who have been posting in networks saying, hey, there are two guys on such and such street, but we don't think they're really ICE, and they turn out not to be. So there is hyper vigilance and awareness. we are not getting the same kind of traffic stops that are happening in predominantly Black spaces. This is a predominantly white city. It's not completely white, obviously, but it is definitely has its issues like most US cities, but Seattle also has a tremendous amount of money. It is big tech. It is probably second only to San Francisco in terms of the tech here. So it makes a difference in how folks are every day treated. The food banks are on high alert and they have a protocol in terms of when ICE shows up, how they protect the people that are in there, how they protect folks that even look like they could be picked up. So there is, and of course we've seen we're only 2.5 hours from Portland. The Frog, I mean, people are getting blow up outfits. And there is, what is it called? Something frivolity. It is a tactic that frankly can be used mostly by white people. I mean, I know definitely there are people who are Black and white that are doing that. And the thing that's happening here is there are white folks that are very much willing to put themselves on the line. And has been through a shift of them learning how to do more than read a good book about racism.
Or speak on social media type, right? So this is what we're talking about when we're saying, if you want to be an ally, we need co-conspirators and we need you on the ground. And, this is where the rubber meets the road. Cheryl, what are the conditions you're seeing in Chicago and how are those shaping the work happening on the ground?
Well, ICE and other federal agents started coming in pretty much after the inauguration. There's a real increase, and then it really intensified. Trump has decided, targeted Chicago with Midway Blitz, and that was sending in, federal agents. There's border and custom patrol, I guess, and then the HSI and state police from Texas came in, and both the governor of Illinois and the mayor of Chicago have been oppositional to that, so they haven't been as complicit as other, complicit in the ways. There's still controversy over how state police were allowed to be increased. And there definitely, there's communities that where there's been intense activity where there's a high Latina presence, but also Chicago is a city of immigrants. So, and we also have a lot of African and Haitian immigrants. I'm not as tied in with those organizations of what they're doing. I've been hearing a little bit more about what's happening in Latina communities, because our within the Southside Together is one of the organizations that's a part of one of the anchor organizations for the Collaborative for Community Wellness, and Brighton Park Neighborhood Council is a foundational organization for this coalition, and really had to pivot to rapid response and in just ways that are, just the virulence, I guess, and going after a number of schools. I know schools there are different schools where ICE agents are. Well, I'm going to say federal agents, because you don't know if they're ICE because of the federalizing. But I talked to people who are doing, watching school patrols to see what's happening, and just areas, where people are being snatched. And, I thought about it is the comparison to slave snatchers was really apropos, but even I wasn't thinking about how the money was attached, the bounties for these bodies. So, and one of the things, and I don't know I don't know the companies that are profiting. I don't know the names of them. That's something that I have been realizing lately. I need to do a deep dive into some of these things. But right now, with the Chicago, the mayor has proposed a people's, progressive budget to really tax. A lot of people have heard the the deficit that Chicago has. And so there's a couple of taxes. One, the community safety surcharge, which would go informally, people refer to as a former head tax, but the proposal is $21 per employee per month for companies that have 100 employees or more. So really the top 3% of companies in Chicago. And the same, and I just recently heard that the same companies that are really lobbying against that being passed are also companies that are getting contracts, these federal contracts. And it's funny how sometimes you're like, oh, right, these are, putting these different pieces and looking at where the money is following, and follow is the expression goes. So these are some of the ways. So there's been a lot of ICER, and which is I'm actually going to I had to, because I'm always blanking on the acronym for ICER, but ICER is the Illinois. I looked up just briefly to see the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, and they have been just really out on the line. And CARPER, which is there's the National Alliance Against Racial Repression, and that's another one I have to see racism, political repression. So, and Chicago, the CARPER is the Chicago Alliance Against. So have been really looking at that. In terms of the South Side Together,
I want to bring Aisha in here because I feel like I want to get her in there. Just hold your thought for 1 minute. So, because I know we unfortunately are close to our time, and I know there's a couple of more questions I want to get to. We talked a lot about crisis and why and how that sparks the urgency, but really it's the formation that sustains us. And so I want to move a little bit more into the community building, what that looks like in practice. And I'll come back to you, Cheryl, in terms of Chicago organizers often talk about being in formation. But before I do that, Aisha, from your vantage point, what does long-term community building look like in practice for you? And what structures or relationships are making a difference?
So I have the absolute privilege of being connected to a lot of organizers and the Black and Brown community here in Seattle. So one of my good friends is Ijoma Oluo, and she started in late spring monthly community gatherings. And so we there's food, and it's about 4 hours or 3 or 4 hours. And we, from all different parts of Seattle, and we talk about what are the ways we are going to protect each other. How do we get to know our neighbors? At the last one, in fact, because Seattle's pretty spread out geographically, so we got together in neighborhoods and we created a group chat, and we are becoming hyper local and encouraging. One of the things I said is get to know your neighbors. You don't have to like your neighbors, and one of the things one of the points she made was, I don't like, it's not about not liking, but it's not about being best friends with everyone. It is making sure you have everyone's number, who is on your block or who is in your building. And the thing about Seattle is it's harder for some folks here. I'm from the Northeast and I'm an Arab. So it's, hello, how are you is my baseline, and getting to connect in community. That is not necessarily the baseline for everyone. And really folks have to learn. And in Seattle, I will say there has been a concerted effort to connect and to really make space for what does it mean to have community. I mean, I see signs in my neighborhood of, hey, come to the community center for a potluck, come meet your neighbors. That has been, so I've lived in the house that I'm in right now since for 5 years. But before that, I came to Seattle in 2013. I've never seen anything like this outward connection. We just had a mayoral race where, just like in New York City, billionaires and corporate forces poured millions and millions of dollars into defeating the woman who won. So Katie Wilson is a socialist Democrat. The Working Families Party supported her and she won. And when I tell you that, I mean, it was down to the wire. And so her win very much demonstrated that the populist movement of people saying we do not want to live in a society that simply controls people, that is just based on money. I'm an abolitionist. The CLF is, encouraging the Unitarian Universalist denomination to study what it means to be abolitionist. And it means that we do not have systems based on stopping people, shaking them down for money, and finally having an abolitionist society that no longer continues the slave catcher setup. So in Seattle, it looks like literally teaching people and telling people, talk to your neighbors, know who your neighbors are. And people here are on high alert. I'm in a neighborhood that is one of the very few predominantly Black and brown neighborhoods in Seattle. So I cannot speak to what the wealthier neighborhoods are doing. But when I was listening to your previous guests, like I said, I mean, violent extractive capitalism runs the show in this country. And in wealthier neighborhoods, we do not have people being stopped. And so there is that grossness and disgusting baseline of racism in this country and anti-Blackness that is on steroids. What we do have is the immigrant population who are migrant workers in Eastern Washington, especially. There are many, many farms, obviously, and ICE has been there. And so the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project has been asking people to come out. And because clergy here, the progressive clergy, we don't have as many congregations or churches in general as most of the rest of the country, but they have been building relationships with the detention center. They've been going out there for over 10 years. People have been holding vigil. And so the network was there, and it has now expanded given what ICE is doing. But we're literally telling people, get to know your neighbor, get to know their name, get their number. You never have to have them over for dinner, but make sure you know who lives around you, and that you have a network and a plan to help each other.
Thanks. Cheryl, back to you. So what does being in formation look like? What does it mean day to day? What structures or relationships make a difference?
At Southside Together, we are really looking at and putting into practice what base building organizing looks like, and really understanding what the difference is between organizing and mobilizing.
Can you share what that is for those that may not know?
So in a short, a quick way of saying it is, like, organizing is people coming in to work with other people who are, connecting with your common self-interest, or are really wanting to get this thing happening and working together. And mobilizing tends to be people responding to the moment of, like the No Kings rally or the Women's March, where people, take to the streets, but they may or may not be connected, to an organization, but people want to show up and show out and do a thing. It does seem that in that there is really. So I think in Chicago, one of the issues, and I think not just Chicago, but one of the issues is how do you corral this energy of mobilization so that people are coming together and really doing the work of structural change. I think now I actually am not somebody who's against mobilizing, as long as that's not all it is, because I think that there is value in that energy and in the show, the show of all of the people, so that you can see, okay, wait,
Large mass.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. But if that's all there is, things don't change. It's like the puddle, it's like a river rises and then it sinks. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And people need to know they're not alone. I mean, I was so heartened. We knew the blue states were going to come out. It was the deep red where, I have a good friend in Baton Rouge who said, I think he said 1,800 people were out in Baton Rouge, Louisiana for the No Kings. So people know they're not alone in not wanting this. Right. And that's, and I'm really fun at parties. I talk about abolition. I met, I went to a party where there were two Black men that I met were both work in the jails. And I said, don't help ICE. And I literally gave them a lecture in the middle of this party. And they said, oh no, we're in Seattle. And they said they used to share information with ICE before the administration. Now they don't. And so hopefully that sticks. I mean, who knows? But I talk about it everywhere. I'm very clear about. People see me coming. I mean, I that's the other way I connect. And then somebody in the room who agrees with me be like, oh yeah, don't help ICE.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Tell me more about this. They were helping ICE. Say more about that.
So these are folks who work in actually Black men who work in the carceral system as guards. And they said at one time they would share information with ICE about who they were arresting. They don't, according to them, they don't do that anymore. So again, now I do know what the new the mayor who's being ousted said, because he knew which way the winds were blowing here. He made a big show of not cooperating with ICE. I didn't believe him for a second. I think he just said that for the election. But now that we have a new mayor coming in, I know she will absolutely not be cooperating with ICE, at least have Seattle police not cooperate with ICE. And I think it's fluid and people go with you need strong, brave, courageous leaders to actually say no and not just go where the wind blows. And this is all about violent extractive capitalism. For-profit prisons are a cancer on our soul. And it is a continuation of slavery, and we need to end it and have reparations. But yeah, there was, and that's always been true since Homeland Security was created. But now we're seeing firsthand what is happening and witnessing. And at least for now, Seattle, while they're here and they're trying to wreak havoc, there are enough folks who are saying no. I mean, they're still here and they are flying people out from Boeing, which is not far from where I am. So there are immigrants being, brought here en masse and then flown out. And I mean, there's the horror still here. It's just showing up differently than other places, and predominantly Black spaces. It's different.
Yeah, I've been really pleased with Mayor Johnson from off the bat said Chicago police will not cooperate with ICE, and putting out, the city has been also part of doing Know Your Rights trainings, and putting, printing the, posters so people can have the flyer saying ICE, civil immigration enforcement cannot enter. So that is something to at least know that that's not happening. There's a relief in knowing your local administrator is not going to be facilitating this horror.
Yeah.
I'm going to facilitate this horror.
Well, I cannot believe we are almost at the end. Now, if you remember, we started this conversation with the immediate harms our community was facing. Then we shifted to what it meant to build strong, grounded organizing. But I want to end with hope. So I'm going to ask you to, both Aisha and Cheryl, to just tell me what's sustaining you right now. What is giving you hope or reminding you that we can still build power together?
This country, I think for the first time, is telling the truth about itself en masse. Even the people who are ICE and genocide enthusiasts are saying so openly. And, that is awful. And there's also more and more people who are connecting authentically and showing up to community potlucks and showing up to say, we are not going to be complicit in this anymore. And I want to quote Ta-Nehisi Coates when I heard him recently on a podcast, who said, this is the best white people we've ever had. That they're more right or wrong. When he said it, I said, oh yeah, I know exactly what he's talking about. So people are showing up, and that gives me, when I tell you, tremendous hope. And I feel a sense of joy and hope in conversations like these, and knowing that this feels in my body different. Yes, there is the chaos that has always been there. This country's always been fascist for Black and brown people, and for disabled people, queer people, and the list goes on. And now we are now at least have much more of a shared reality of what's happening. Even the people that are in denial, there are less and less of them. That's what gives me hope. I have a lot of joy in community here. So
thank you. Cheryl, what's giving you hope?
I would say yes, I agree with some of the things with Aisha. And also I think people starting to be able to have other conversations within communities, and having people who maybe never pay attention to what's happening to be saying, hey, what's happening? So I think that is good. And I think also this opportunity of doing deep organizing and kind of bringing people into movement is giving me hope. But then also, I'm easy. A good sunset will make me hopeful and happy.
That's also important. Thank you both so much for everything you've shared. Before I close, I'd love for folks that are listening to know how they can support your work and stay connected. So I'll start with you, Aisha. Tell us how we can stay connected.
CLFUU.org. Please sign up for our newsletter. Find out about our work on abolition. It is a global movement. So yeah, please contact us at CLFUU.org.
And Cheryl, how can they stay connected?
Oh, they can contact me at Cheryl at SouthsideTogether.org.
Thank you again. What we've heard today isn't only analysis. It's a reminder that none of us are powerless. We are, in fact, each other's best protection. I want to thank all of our panelists again today: Amber, Sam, Aisha, Cheryl. Today's conversation reminded us that even as the harm is urgent, our strength comes from our community, from formation, and from the long haul organizing that doesn't wait for crisis. Thank you to everyone who's watching, for staying connected, for staying informed, and staying committed to this work. We'll see you next month for our final episode of this year. But don't worry, we are going to be back for 2026. And until then, stay grounded, stay present, and above all, stay outspoken.
In a time when our rights and our lives are under attack, we need bold truths and trusted voices leading the way. Outspoken with Regina brings policy, power, and purpose together, uncensored, unfiltered, and unapologetic. Now streaming wherever you get your podcasts. Follow, subscribe, and speak truth with us. This is Outspoken with Regina, and we're just getting started.